So now if you were to put these two together, that would short circuit those, and according to the manufacturer, it might explode. It definitely would be very bad. Which reminds me, I'll say this again at the beginning and edit it in. When you're working on these things, do not have them charged. Just wanted to add this little bit that I forgot to record earlier about choosing your cells properly for what you're going to be using them for. Like, you don't want to make one of these for a freestyle quad. That's not really going to work. You're going to be better off with a LiPo. You need to consider the amp draw of the quad you're going to be flying, so it's best to have the quad already made and have a LiPo for it and just test out what the amp draw is while using the LiPo, and then see what kind of amps you're going to be trying to pull out of it, and then decide on a battery that's going to work for you based on how many amps you're pulling. This is the first battery I started out with, I guess a couple of years ago now. It's Samsung 40T, so it's a 21700 cells. So they're a little heavier. Let's get a scale here. So this one, a 6S made out of the 21700 cells, 463 grams. And this one puts out 35 amps constant. So I was flying with this using just a single pack with the quad that I'm flying now, as well as with some the previous one I was flying as well. And then the year after, I switched to 18650s and started flying with two of them. And that's definitely heavier than one 6S of the other. So it's at 642 grams. But these put out also 35 amps constant, same as this one was rated for, except they both put out 35 amps constant, and the amp draw gets split between them when you're using them in parallel. And now this year I'm trying to go, at least experimenting with going with 4S. So I'm going to be using two of these. Here's two that are made the same. Two of these in parallel again, but these ones are rated for 45 amps, and the amp draw from the quad will be split between the two of them while they're connected in parallel. So the amps are going to be a little bit higher, being 4S over 6S, but these can take a little bit more amperage, so that should make up for it, I believe. I made some smaller ones, just 4-cell or 4S packs out of 18650s for my Flywoo Explorer. That's my first time trying the VTC6, and they're actually a little better than I was expecting. 2800 milliamp hours through the 3000 milliamp hour pack, it was still above 3 volts. And same thing with the Molicel P26A. I find them about the same when I'm 90% of the way through the pack. It's still above 3 volts. This one, though, the VTC6 it's only rated to put out a constant amp draw of 15 amps. And this one's rated for constant amp draw of 35. I'm not sure, you wouldn't want to actually pull the constant rating from them for the whole time, because you'll end up overheating the battery and shortening its life. But I try to, I think as a general basic rule to start off with, have a battery have your setup be rated for twice what you're going to be pulling. It's like my quad that I've been flying all last year maxes out at about 45 amps, and I usually pull 25 to 35 out of it. And these things put out 35 constant. So with the two of them, I'm doubling. I have double the amps available of what my quad's going to want. So that way the battery doesn't end up overheating and have a short life cycle. And again, I'm not an electrical engineer. I don't think we can call this a battery making tutorial. It's I'm just going to show you guys what I do when I make a battery, and you can use that to put towards your knowledge and decide whether or not you want to make a battery yourself. But definitely do some other research and look up some other information, and get really familiar with parallel and series and connecting balance leads and so on. Although I will go over that a little bit in the while I'm building the battery packs. So this is all the stuff we're gonna need to do this. I guess start with the things that aren't on here. Obviously a soldering iron. This is just a cheap sort of budget one. It's only a 60-watt soldering iron. It seems to work okay for this. You'd probably be a little better off with something a little stronger. And I'm going to use a glue gun. And hopefully people don't cringe here, but I'm going to gently use a sort of Dremel tool to just to gently scratch a small part of the surface in the middle. Alright, all the other stuff, obviously going to need solder, and I like using this rosin flex pen just to get the solder to stick a little easier. Electrical tape, and I use duct tape to wrap the battery afterwards, like this one. I always Velcro my batteries down, so we're going to Velcro strips to put on the back after, and elastic. You're obviously going to need a balance lead. I don't have any more good proper silicone wire ones, so I'm just going to use this cheap old one for now. I can change it later. I use some foam for wrapping around the top just to protect the wires of the battery if it gets banged on the ends. Even just for moving them around, putting them in a bag, just making sure like the balance leads and stuff don't get crimped and banged on the ends of the batteries. It's good to pack a little bit of foam around it before you tape it down. Some little jumpers to put between the cells, heat shrink. I'm going to use 14 gauge wire for the XT60, which is the only thing I don't have here, but yeah, an XT60 as well. I've also put and the batteries cells come with a wrap on them from the factory, but I put a second wrap on them just to keep them from being able to short circuit or touch each other, because the entire battery is a metal can, so it's basically all negative except for the little dimple on the positive side. That's the only positive part. But so you could, without any of the wraps on it, you could do this and short circuit the battery. But I'll maybe talk about that a bit more when I get to soldering. So for now I've got to very gently score the surface. This is not all that abrasive, and I'm going to be really gentle about it. The positive side I think is a little more forgiving because it's a raised section of metal that's I think a little bit thicker, but this side from I've broken a battery before from trying to pull it up, pulling a spot welded tab off of it, and this one's pretty thin. You really don't want to scratch it very much, just a little bit, and only in the very middle, so you're not causing the solder to want to wander off to the side following your trail of scored metal. If you don't have one of these, you could probably do this as well with a little piece of sandpaper folded into a pointed tip and just gently doing it. And where you're not trying to scrape away at the metal really, you're just scratching the surface so that the solder will more readily stick. And then I'm also going to, I guess I can do this part now, use the rosin flux pen in all these spots that I've just scratched so that it will help the solder to want to stick. And I don't know if you can see there's just a tiny bit on there. You don't really need very much. It'll get really messy if you use too much of this. All right. So I should also say this isn't a beginner soldering job to do. You want to be a little more experienced at it. I'm sorry I'm not using a better soldering iron with a digital temperature thing and stuff on it. But I'd say you want to have it turned up a little bit high. I think this is probably, set to 350 or 600 Fahrenheit or maybe a little bit more. So I'm just going to use this pile of coiled up Velcro and a roll of wire here to hold the cell upright when I do this. My soldering iron has gotten cooking hot here on like take 5 or something of trying this. So tin up the soldering iron, obviously. And you want to do this pretty quickly because this is the no-no part of, let's take that off, of making batteries like this. Is you're supposed to, according to the data sheet from the manufacturer, use a spot welder and not solder because soldering heats up the chemistry inside and can ruin the battery. Myself, from making these ones, I haven't noticed any difference, but then I wouldn't know what the difference was because I made all of them, right? They seem to work all right for me though. And one of those welding machines seems like kind of a pain in the ass to get one just to make a few batteries, every year or two. So we just want to be really careful not to hold this on here too long. Just get your heat on, get your solder on, and get off it again. That was probably a little bit too much. Probably should have used just a little bit less there. See, it's all because of the surface tension of it. It will sit up and dome up above without dripping off of the edge too readily. But dripping over that edge there is what you really must avoid. And then the negative side isn't nearly as sketchy, but it's, I think, more sensitive because the chemistry is really just right on the other side of that piece of metal. I'm using a thicker, heavier chisel tip so that it helps hold the heat and doesn't cool off too fast when I put it down onto the battery or the cell. And obviously, I say you should be experienced at soldering, so you should already know to clean your soldering iron off a lot here. Make sure you're always using a nice clean tip. when you're done this, you really want to see like a nice shiny rounded dome sort of cover on it like that, so you know it's really flown and had the same heat throughout the whole thing. I'm not really sure how to explain what a bad joint would look like, one that might pull apart where the solder just melts around but doesn't actually go in. It would kind of curl in around on its edges. Like you really want to see the edge of the solder. We'll see on this one here when I do it. You really want to see that edge of the solder look like it's flowing onto the other surface. So let's take a look at this one now. I don't know how well this is going to show up on the camera there, but you can really see that the edges of it look like it's flowing out onto the other one and not, they don't look like they sort of curl underneath. So it looks like it should be a good solid solder connection there. You really don't want to have the heat on there any longer than that. Just as little as you can, but still being able to get a good solid connection, because you're going to count on this. If this solder joint fails on you, that means your quad's going to drop out of the sky. So you are probably better off, I'm not saying, I don't know if I should say this, but you're probably better off if it's a matter of giving it an extra half a second of heat to be extra sure about that solder joint, then that's better than having it possibly fail on you. Because you really want to trust this. Just as much you want to trust the solder connections between your motor wires and your ESC. There, I don't know if this is going to show up for you guys, but for you more beginner people who shouldn't be doing this, but this little ball of solder that's splattered up onto the side here, that so that's splattered up off the side. If I was soldering a power pad on a flight controller or an ESC and that flew off onto one of the FETs and connected to the wires together, that little thing would, and I know this from experience because I've done it, had a little solder ball do this, and I only found out afterwards. And anyways, it melted the ESC and the motor pretty much instantly upon plugging it in. There's a good reason to use a voltmeter to check your quad before you do your first power test, or at least use one of these things that will stop the surge from happening. This would have at least saved the motor for sure. I don't know about the ESC, but it would have saved the motor. All right, those are all done. Next, I need to tape these together just so that they're a little more manageable. And I can stand the 4 of them on their end to do the next part. So this will connect to our XT60. So this is our positive. This is the negative. And this one is going to be negative. And this one's going to be positive. So this will be the positive top here. So this is our positive for the XT60 and our negative for the XT60. It's a four cells in series. So we're going to connect these cells together in series using these. I just made these jumpers out of, this is actually 12 gauge, even though I'm using 14 gauge for the power leads. I figured just the stuff inside that I can't see, it's, you know, gonna be like an extra gram or something, or gram and a half, whatever. Just be a little more safe than sorry. And now the balance lead for this. Let's just have it flipped so that's the positive side and that's the negative side. So your one balance lead is going to come from there. So you have 4 cells, so you're going to have 5 leads on your balance. And now these ones here, I just always connect these on the negative side here. Doesn't matter which end of this you go to, but because it's just solid wire in between, it's gonna be the same reading on both sides of it. But I like doing it on the negative side here just because you're staying away from possibly having some kind of accident again with what I was talking about on the top side, on the positive side, with solder spilling over and bridging and causing the battery to short. So I figured the less work you do on the positive side, the better. And there's also more space just to work with, because the whole entire bottom end is the negative end on that side. So always add these balanced ones on the negative side. So you can see when we have these organized together, we want to have them taped together in opposite pairs. All right, so taping them together in opposite pairs. And this is just the way I like to do this because I like to add glue later on in between the cells just to help stop them from moving before I do the final taping. So for now, I just tape the top on one pair and I tape the bottom on another pair, and then I tape the middle when I tape the pairs together. Just that way it leaves me some gaps all over to get glue in between on some of the cells here and there. It's not positive, let's go this side. Positive and negatives. So now this time it's going to be, so the positives are across from each other. It's hard to tell with these insulator rings on, so I just feel for that gap. So they're going to be like this. So the top's done on that one. I'm going to do the bottom on this pair. And that's all I'm going to do for now for holding them together. Alright, so I have this turned how our picture was. So it's the positive and the negative for our XT60. So now we have to do the jumpers, which will be right here. And then the other 2 jumpers are going to go connecting both batteries on this side. So that when we look at it, it's going to go positive, a jumper between these 2, a jumper between these 2, and then a jumper between those 2, and back out at our negative. Okay, now we're going to put the jumpers on to create the series connection between the cells. So remember, like the picture, we do them like this, so it's going to be positive and negative. Those are going to be our XT60 connections, and then negative and positive. So these 2 are going to be connected together and then flipped over on the other side. So that's these two, and then flipped over on the other side, we do these two together. And yeah, you're gonna want to use tweezers or something like that, because especially these little short wires are gonna get really hot. So for this part, you need to really make sure your soldering iron is nice and hot. I already did it once, and for some reason had a little more trouble with it than I did in the past. So I think I'm going to try heating these wire pieces up a little bit first. Advanced soldering. Sloppy. And you really got to make sure you, I mean, this part we're okay, but the next couple you really have to make sure you know exactly what you're doing. According to the manufacturer, these can even explode if you short circuit them, so that one's much better. It's all flowed together. Here you can see there's still this tiny little dimple, but I think it's going to be okay. It's all flowed together fully around the sides and stuff. And it's like kind of well submerged in that bubble. So back to how we keep looking at it with our positive and our negative for the XT60. So now if you were to put these two together, that would short circuit those, and you know, according to the manufacturer, it might explode. It definitely would be very bad. Which reminds me, I'll say this again at the beginning and edit it in. When you're working on these things, do not have them charged. Right now, these are at 3.5, so they're fairly low. It's even a little below storage. But this is how the place I got them from ships them at this voltage to be safe for shipping. So I like it like that. I don't charge them or anything when I get them. I just work on them with the voltage down like that, and then charge the pack after I get this part done. All right, now we're going to put the XT60s onto the 14 gauge leads. It's just a pair of pliers with a couple of elastics. It just helps to brace it, makes things a bit easier. The plastic in the XT60s can melt, and then these posts slide around and move out of place. So I'm just going to use the female end, the part that normally gets attached to the XT or to the ESC. I'm just going to put that on so it helps to get take some of the heat away from it and just brace these posts in case in case the plastic gets a little soft here. So start with just tinning the XT60 connector. Like this, just for unplugging the battery. It's kind of a bit of stress relief for so you don't end up pulling on the wires, because there's not that much to grab onto on the XT60 there. And it's not quite the right size, so I'm gonna stretch it to fit properly. also want to have a little bit of heat shrink on the battery side here. Just helps, same thing with strain relief on just bending this part too much back and forth right where it comes out of the battery. I think I'm going to shorten those up because we already marked out positive on the battery, but you can always tell by just the positive is the one that's the dimple that's raised, and the negative is the one that's just one flat bottom. That looks like a pretty good connection. It's all flowed together. Just slide these on as far as they'll go. The negative one's not such a big deal to get it on all that far. The positive one, it's nice to get it on far enough that it's totally covering the wire from it and being able to touch any of the side of the center. The wire's got insulation on it, but sort of the point of this is just that little extra bit of safety. Let's just shrink those in place. Now that we've got all the large wires on, we can start getting the balance leads assembled on it. We want to take care of all the bigger wires first, because if you do the small wires for the balance leads and then melt the solder to attach the big one, the small wire is just going to fall off as the solder all melts. But if you've attached the big one, you can melt just a small portion of it and get the small wire buried in liquid solder without desoldering the larger one. Alright, so for the balance lead, I just always like to have another battery there just to look at the example. Make sure you're using a battery that's done properly. So positive is on this side, so I don't know, for some reason this balance lead, they put the brown wire there. So this is the positive one. The positive balance lead goes there. The red that's right beside it goes to this connection here. So I'm just going to fold that over there. Put a little piece of electrical tape on it just to keep it there and keep things from getting confusing. And I would do the same for the one beside the negative, the one right on the very end, the opposite end from the positive. So the green, this is going to be going to our negative. So the yellow right beside it is the one that goes to the next balance point right beside the negative lead. Make sure you're really comfortable with understanding which connection goes where for all of these. Look up something on Google, like, I don't know, a picture for LiPo battery balance lead connections or something like that, and just get another view of it or opinion just than what you're getting from me. Make sure you totally understand it, because you don't want to get this wrong. I guess we'll check with a multimeter at the end to make sure that the connections are done right. And then the last one, the one in the middle, is just going to go to this opposite side here. So the first one, the green, goes to your negative. The one beside it, the yellow one, is going to the next connection. The one beside that is going to the next connection. And then the one beside that is the same as the one beside our positive. And that goes to the next connection, and then we're back to our positive. Tin up these two wires. And you don't have to melt the whole thing like crazy. You just wanna bury the wire in some molten solder without lifting up the larger one. Double check now that they all seem like they're buried in liquid solder, and we're not going to have to redo something. I think those all look pretty good. Alright, so now I just want to add a little bit of glue just to stop the balance leads from moving around and protect them a little bit. Oh, I'm gonna run out of glue. I also just put a little bit to attach it to the battery. I just like to get them all attached together so that if you pull on this end, it doesn't end up pulling on the wire connection. They'll all kind of be stuck together. Keep them stay where they are. You don't need much. You don't want to add a bunch of weight to this. You just need a little bit to help things from moving around. Shouldn't be able to yank on the connection to the cells at all. Now we can start taping the foam over it to protect things a bit. And let's just figure out how to arrange the foam on there to get it to cover this nicely. I'll just kind of trim it to length to get it to fit on there. A couple of times I have crashed or had something go wrong, run into a bush when I'm trying to land or something, and end up smacking the battery, so it's better to have it weigh a few more grams than have to keep replacing cells because it's getting damaged. Which, speaking of which, that's what happened to me when I specifically went out to just film a little bit of freestyle or like tree diving flying with my 7-inch long range quad to put along with this video, just to kind of show the kind of flying you can do with lithium ion. And ended up smacking a branch and getting my camera tipped up to like 60 degrees of up tilt. And ended up scraping my battery along the concrete when I was trying to land. So I actually put this sort of a dent and big scratch in the bottom of the battery here. So luckily I've ordered a spare one when I got my batteries. So I'm just going to change that out for the other good one. But that's, yeah, part of what this will help with. I'm gonna give it one more really tight wrap around the cells. This, if you stretch this tight, it really helps keep things in place and brace the cells. It's too much of a pain to try to do this with the duct tape at the end, because this electrical tape is stretchy. The good old dollar store, because we all need shiny, reflective red duct tape with circles on it. Might be easier to help see the quad if it goes down though, with some colorful tape on it. I always start on the bottom, then my Velcro that I put on hides the seam. Right. Now, just put Velcro on my batteries to help them stick in place. I've kind of trimmed off one side of it just to make it a little bit thinner, so that two strips will fit on here nicely. Well, I guess I can skip a step there. For people that haven't done this a bunch of times, we should probably check the balance lead voltages with a multimeter and make sure that it's all the right voltages in the right order across there before taping it all up, in case we have to do an adjustment. So yes, we should have done this, checked the multimeter before taping it up, but let's do that step now anyways. I think these batteries for these cells are at 3.5 volts because the lithium ions go a little lower. So that's our main voltage there, 14. That's good. And then going across the first, starting with the brown one that came from the positive side. So I'm going to put my positive lead on there and the negative on the one right beside it. So that's across one cell, it's 3.5. And then across two cells, 6.9. Across three cells, it's 10.4. And across all four, 14. Same as off the XT60. And then if you had something backwards, it'll tell you that it's negative instead of, it'll put a negative sign on it. We got them the right way. Positive, negative, 14 volts. That's it. It's done.